trade bounce. I'm going to do some kind of trade deal with them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to impose 20% trade tariffs on the EU, who I don't like. And where is our old friend Starmer going to be on that? At one stage, he'll be smiling, thank you so much, and the other realising that he is going to be dancing to Trump's tune for the next 4 years. This is going to be the greatest thing I have ever seen, watching socialists having to deal with somebody of the right.
Keir Starmer, our poor, overwhelmed Prime Minister, has officially lost it after getting roasted by none other than Donald Trump. Well, it all happened because Starmer had the audacity to underestimate Donald Trump. You'd think Trump would settle for just a few harsh words, but nope. Why bother with a verbal slap when you can threaten an entire nation with a tsunami of taxes, right?
The great thing about Trump doing what he's going to do is you either get on board with it or you suffer. And that's the message Farage should be driving home to Starmer. Get on that bandwagon. Get on the bandwagon of a strong, prosperous, deregulated, lower tax economy so the UK can actually compete with the US. You know, that's what we need to do. We need to compete with global economies.
Starmer's barely been in power for 6 months, and here he is, already making an enemy out of Trump. But let's be honest, it's not just Keir who's paying the price, it's the whole UK. Trump is like that nightmare neighbour who knows exactly how to make your life miserable without breaking a sweat.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course we will discuss issues of our economy with the President-elect, as we already have done. Economy, security and global conflict are issues of real significance that ought to unite this House.
So you wouldn't believe what happened unless you saw it. Donald Trump, never one to shy away from stirring the pot, dropped an absolute bombshell during a live TV broadcast, and guess who lost it? Keir Starmer. That's right, Mr. Calm and Collected himself went full-on fiery, launching into a tirade so charged it felt like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire career.
And in doing so, not just do the right thing, but maybe mend some fences between this government and the incoming presidency of Donald Trump's, given that the whole of his cabinet have been so rude about him over the last few years.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see the honourable member making a rare appearance back here in Britain. He spent so much time in America recently. I was half expecting to see him on the immigration statistics when we see the next batch. But he may have missed. I did congratulate the incoming president last week, and we will work with him. The point he makes about Iran is a very serious point, and we will work across the House and with our allies on it. Obviously, on question of prescription, we keep them under review. Thank you.
And honestly, who could blame him? Trump didn't just casually criticise the UK, he practically steamrolled over its sovereignty, jabbed at Labour policies, and, as his pièce de résistance, suggested Nigel Farage, the human embodiment of political chaos, as the UK's ambassador to the US. If Starmer wasn't already fuming, that last one certainly did the trick.
There are a lot of economic opportunities. America loves British luxury goods and yachts and engine parts. And the UK will need our energy because you all won't be making energy. So America is a great recipient for that.
Trump didn't just tiptoe into the conversation, he bulldozed right in, declaring that the UK's alliances were wobbly and its political direction questionable. It wasn't subtle, and it definitely wasn't diplomatic. Oh no, it was classic Trump, brash, unfiltered, and delivered with a smirk that practically screamed, "What are you going to do about it?" But he didn't stop there. Trump, in all his reality TV glory, decided to throw in a plot twist by naming Nigel Farage as the UK's ambassador to the US. Yes, that Nigel Farage, the man whose political career has been fueled by controversy and whose greatest hits include Brexit chaos and endless divisive rhetoric.
Keir Starmer in how to deal with President-elect Trump, whose political approach and philosophy is diametrically opposed to the approach and philosophy of the new Labour government.
You have to come in with an open mind. Let's forget the past.
Forget the tweets, maybe.
Forget the tweets. Forget
I
sending.
think Donald Trump will forget the tweets.
Well, I mean, he's obviously forgiven them for his vice president and his potential secretary of state, right?
Yeah.
Who were anti-Trump before. Will he forget about the 100 labor activists that went over?
If Trump's aim was to get a rise out of Starmer, mission accomplished. It was like watching someone poke a bear and then act surprised when it roars. Now, Starmer isn't exactly known for his fiery outbursts. He's more the type to play it safe, deliver measured critiques, and avoid making headlines for anything too dramatic. But Trump's comments hit a nerve. Scratch that. They hit every nerve, and Starmer responded with a ferocity that had everyone talking. First, he accused Trump of undermining the UK's global standing, calling the remarks a direct insult to British sovereignty, and he didn't mince words either. This wasn't a polite disagreement, it was a full-on takedown. Starmer made it clear that he wasn't going to let Trump, of all people, lecture the UK on its politics.
They did make a statement on that, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think you need to have an open mind, and Keir Starmer will need to make a decision on which regulatory sphere they want to operate in. Do they want to operate in a competitive-based one like the United States and create the gold standard of regulatory trade policy, especially when it comes to digital? Or do you want to take the more top-down approach from the EU? And I think if you're focused on growth and jobs and opportunity, the American model is much more compelling for that.
Then came the pièce de résistance, Starmer's passionate defence of Labour's policies and his scathing rejection of Trump's suggestion that the UK adopt a US-style growth model. For Starmer, this wasn't just a policy debate, it was a battle for the soul of British politics. But let's circle back to the Nigel Farage debacle because, honestly, it deserves its own chapter. Trump's suggestion to appoint Farage as ambassador wasn't just provocative, it was downright ridiculous. Farage as a diplomat, that's like hiring a pyromaniac to run the fire department.
And think wisely who your UK ambassador should be.
Yeah. If we were offered a trade deal by Trump, and that's obviously something which I think a lot of people around Trump think he is prepared to offer Britain.
Starmer's reaction to this was as sharp as it was immediate. He dismissed the idea as absurd and dangerous, warning that aligning with Farage's divisive politics would be a disaster for the UK. And he didn't just stop at criticising the proposal, he used it as an opportunity to draw a clear line in the sand. According to Starmer, this wasn't just about rejecting Farage, it was about rejecting Trumpism, the ideology that prioritises chaos over collaboration and division over diplomacy. At the heart of this entire clash was a bigger issue, the UK's struggle to assert its sovereignty in a world where powerful allies like the US sometimes feel more like overbearing partners.
Would that have to include things like chlorine-washed chicken, which we hear so much about, and hormone-fed beef, which obviously is a huge problem for politicians here because it would be very bad for British farmers? Do you think he'd be prepared to negotiate on that stuff, or is it all or nothing?
I think there's always room to negotiate. But would the British take their tariffs off American pork? Will the Brits allow certain foods to come in? And by the way, the chlorine-washed chicken, I mean, it's such a tired debate, but honestly, that it's nothing. The chlorine that's in that water to wash the chicken. In fact, it meets EU regulation standards, which is very hard to do sometimes. So I don't, I think anything is possible. And you look at the USMCA, the US-Canada-Mexico agreement, which was the NAFTA the free trade agreement that was revisited under Trump and renegotiated with Canada and Mexico. And you were able to overcome many hurdles, agricultural hurdles with Canada. Why can't that also happen here?
Trump's comments painted the UK as a nation too weak to stand on its own, too reliant on American influence. But Starmer wasn't having it. He seized the moment to advocate for a more autonomous British stance, one free from the shadow of Trump's political circus. Of course, this wasn't without its critics. Some argued that Starmer's vision of independence was more symbolic than practical. After all, how does the UK maintain strong alliances while also keeping its distance? It's a tightrope act that Starmer will have to master if he wants to turn this moment into a long-term win. Let's not forget the part where Trump took direct aim at Labour's policies, calling them weak and uninspired. He argued that the UK needed to adopt a US-style growth model, one that prioritises deregulation and rapid expansion.
And I just think the Brits need to be proud of what they make and what they do and what they produce because America wants it. And America loves the UK. You have great brand popularity in the US.
You've talked about who could be the next ambassador. One person spoken about as the possible next ambassador is Peter Mandelson, who was a very senior figure in the Tony Blair government and is still, of course, very closely associated with the Labour Party. Another who has said he's there to help is Nigel Farage. Who do you think would be better for us as ambassador to the United States, Nigel Farage or Peter Mandelson?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump's favorite Briton, of course. You want someone who the Donald likes, you know? So, of course, Nigel Farage would be the best choice. But, of course, he's Keir Starmer's opposition.
Yeah, and he's an MP.
And he's an MB. He's busy over here. So, Nigel has put himself forward to be as helpful as he can, and I'm sure he will. And I hope the government will take him up on that. Out of love of country.
Now, Trump is pitching the US-style economy is about as surprising as Farage-loving Brexit. It's his go-to solution for everything. But Starmer wasn't about to let Trump dictate terms. He defended Labour's approach, emphasising the importance of stability and sustainability over reckless growth. Here's where things got dicey. While Starmer's cautious stance resonated with those who value careful governance, it also left him open to criticism. Trump's boldness, however reckless, had an appeal that made Starmer's measured approach seem, well, a little too safe. This wasn't just a policy debate, it was a clash of leadership styles. On one side, you had Trump, the bombastic showman, making sweeping declarations and tossing out provocative ideas like confetti. On the other, Starmer, the steady but fiery defender of British values, trying to prove he could hold his own against a global heavyweight.
So, of course, Nigel Farage would be the best choice. But, of course, he's Keir Starmer's opposition.
Yeah, and he's an MP.
And he's an MB. He's busy over here. So, Nigel has put himself forward to be as helpful as he can, and I'm sure he will. And I hope the government will take him up on that.
For Starmer, this was a make-or-break moment. Could he stand up to Trump's larger-than-life persona? Could he assert himself as a leader, capable of navigating complex international issues? The verdict? It's complicated. Starmer's passionate response won him praise for his ability to stand firm under pressure. But it also highlighted the challenges he faces in defining his leadership style, one that balances boldness with caution, vision with pragmatism. In the days following the broadcast, the fallout was as dramatic as the clash itself. Trump's supporters hailed his comments as a wake-up call for the UK, praising his willingness to speak his mind. Meanwhile, Starmer's backers celebrated his fiery rebuttal as a defining moment in his political career.
So I think in whatever capacity, we know that Donald Trump will answer Nigel Farage's phone call, but I also think he'll answer the Prime Minister's phone call too. And the foreign secretaries. So I don't think we should blow it up too much, but I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for the government to really make inroads for this country with the United States, because you have incredibly friendly, warm vibes now from the White House and from both houses, the Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives.
But beyond the immediate reactions, this clash forced both sides to confront some uncomfortable truths. For the UK, it was a reminder of its precarious position on the global stage, caught between the desire for independence and the reality of its reliance on powerful allies. For Starmer, it was a chance to prove that he's not just a cautious politician, but a leader who can rise to the occasion when it matters most. For Trump, the broadcast was another opportunity to dominate the global conversation. His bold remarks ensured that he remained front and center in the news cycle, and his critiques of Labour policies resonated with those who see the UK as stuck in a rut. For Starmer, this was a chance to prove his mettle, to show that he's not afraid to take on a figure as formidable as Trump. His passionate defence of British sovereignty and his rejection of Trump's divisive rhetoric earned him respect, even from some of his harshest critics. But let's be honest, the real winner here was the drama. This wasn't just a political debate, it was a spectacle, a transatlantic showdown that kept everyone on the edge of their seats. At the end of the day, this clash wasn't just about Trump and Starmer, it was about the kind of leadership the UK needs in an increasingly uncertain world.
So Nigel has put himself forward to be as helpful as he can, and I'm sure he will, and I hope the government will take him up on that out of love of country. But Peter Mandelson, he's an experienced politician. He does herald back from the Blair days and the war in Iraq. and Afghanistan with George W. Bush. Not great fond memories for today's Republicans.
Trump's bombshell remarks may have been provocative, but they also sparked an important conversation about the UK's future. Should it align more closely with the US or carve out a path of greater independence? For Starmer, this was more than just a televised argument. It was a defining moment. It showed that he's willing to stand up for his country, even when faced with one of the most polarizing figures in modern politics.
You were able to overcome many hurdles, agricultural hurdles with Canada. Why can't that also happen here? And I just think the Brits need to be proud of what they make and what they do and what they produce, because America wants it. And America loves the UK. You have great brand popularity in the US.
Well, he reminded everyone why he's still the master of grabbing headlines and setting the agenda, even from thousands of miles away. In the end, this wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a battle for the future of British politics. Starmer's fiery response proved that he's not afraid to stand his ground, but it also raised questions about whether his cautious approach is enough to navigate the challenges ahead. If you want to know what happened when Keir Starmer really went wild after Trump's bombshell, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss the full breakdown of this unforgettable political showdown. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on Starmer's fiery response. Was he right to go off? Let's talk.